Welcome to another episode of the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Today with me, Dr. Joan Kong. She has been praised as one of the most compelling advocates for plant-based nutrition today. She has given numerous presentations at festivals and universities worldwide, and she is an author, speaker, and in addition to her animal and environmental advocacy work, she is a critically acclaimed classical pianist. Stick around, I'd like to introduce her to you. Hi, Joan, how are you?
Hi, Nancy. It's so great to see you, and thank you for inviting me to be on Vegan Pulse today.
Thank you for being here. It's great to see you too. So, can you tell me your personal story and why you became vegan?
Okay, well, my personal story is really not that different from a lot of people's. When I talk to the public and visit with college students and people who are interested in plant-based nutrition, I point out that so many of us were simply born into this culture, this society that accepts as normal the exploitation of animals. So I grew up in a household that ate meat, and I'll admit, I never thought about the animal part that lay on my plate. Nothing in my background urged me to think about what I was doing. And I think that's the position that most people come from. And it really wasn't until, gosh, I was in my late 20s. My husband and I were living in San Antonio, Texas at the time, where I had a college teaching job. And one day he brought home a book, and the book was called, I'm sure you know the book, and a lot of your readers as well, Animal Factories by Peter Singer and Jim Mason. It was a thin book, black and white pictures. It actually, in the early 80s, this was a very controversial and groundbreaking book because it was one of the first instances where the public was shown pictures and descriptions of where their food comes from, what happens to these animals in factory farm facilities. So right away, it's like the light bulb just went off in my head. And I was thinking, why in the world did I not? It didn't occur to me to think about this. And that's the case with most people. And I also asked myself, how can I continue to be a part of this? So after we read the book, the very next day, we decided we would forever leave animals off of our plate. And then, of course, gradually we got rid of using all animal products in our lives. So for me, there was that sudden moment, and to me, that's so important because I am a college professor. So the large part of my advocacy is simply about education, about spreading the facts, telling people what goes behind the food industry, and then people can make their own choices. So it's about planting seeds, right? Helping people to become more and more aware. And certainly we know that the vegan movement is growing all around the world.
Yes, and that's exactly it. Planting seeds and hoping that they will not
Right,
take long to rise, right?
right. And I think it's so important for those of you watching this show that are perhaps beginning vegans, and there's that sense of excitement that you want to share it right away with everybody else. I always suggest to enter into very friendly conversations with people. You and I had that experience where we had just eaten, was it lunch at a restaurant, and we were both wearing our vegan t-shirts, and someone was taking a picture, right? Was that what it was? Yeah. And so we were calling that soft advocacy. And I'm sure you've had the experience too, where you're wearing a vegan t-shirt and you're in a store and it's kind of like a conversation starter. And maybe someone says, hey, I'm interested in going plant-based. What is that like? So starting up these conversations to see what people value and where they're coming from. So it's a very positive experience. And I think most people do realize that eventually.
Yeah. Now, how is the health of the planet affected by the foods that we eat using the animals?
So the connection between our food choices and the environment is something that is so critical at this point. And it's something that, similar to climate change, it's something that the public, the mainstream media does not it doesn't occur to them to think about it. We kind of see food and the climate as sort of this distant thing, as if it's something that we're not connected to, when on the contrary, we're seeing that our actions are are having a direct impact on our capabilities, our sustainability, our ability to live. And of course, with the current crisis with coronavirus, this is like a warning shot, right? It's essentially telling us humans we need to look closely at our relationship to other living beings, what we're doing to their natural habitats, because all of our priorities on unrestrained urbanization, the idea of progress, that we do everything just for our own needs, it's really coming back to hurt us. So, you look at climate change and the fact that the livestock industry accounts for over 50% of man-made greenhouse gas emissions. Look at the wildfires out in the West. Uh, Water usage, about a third of global water usage is taken up by the livestock industry. So you have increasing drought and desertification happening all around the planet, which means loss of critical organic material that's stored not only in trees, but in the soil as well. And I always tell people that in the Amazon, you look at 90% of the deforestation that's happened in the Amazon is due to growing feed crops and creating grazing land for these animals. And then we're decimating our oceans, not only with pollution, but in terms of just decimating the stocks of fish used for food. I mean, they're literally saying that by 2048, we will have depleted all of the natural stocks that people use in order to consume fish. And not only on top of that, speaking of pollution, they're saying that by 2050, there'll be more plastic than fish in the ocean. Again, for most people, they imagine that the ocean is this unlimited, underground, beautiful environment, and there's very little sense of connection to what we're doing, how we're destroying this precious habitat. So there are a lot of reasons why in our food choices, we really, we need to really start thinking about the impacts we're having upon our planet. I mean, the earth will go on, but we may not survive it, right?
Right. I mean, and yeah, it's just crazy. The animals will thrive. We will die. The
Yes.
planet will thrive. And
Right.
all because we could not just leave animals off the plate.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people are disconnected from it. And if you look back at the whole history behind how we've exploited animals, it's been about 10,000 years since humans started herding animals. And this kind of perception or mindset developed that animals became things. The number of animals you own became an indicator of your wealth. This whole idea that these creatures do not have any individuality, they're just non-feeling things, units of production. So the whole animal agriculture industry became all wound up within that whole idea of consumerism, that we use things, right? That humans' role is that we're superior to all other life and we can do with them as we please. So what we really need is a paradigm shift. It's a huge paradigm shift, but we really, we need to look at this very seriously about the impact, not only upon the animals and the planet, but our own sense of identity. Because when you think of the most beautiful part of being human, I think, is how we care for one another, right? And I think that's really come to light a lot during this COVID-19 crisis. We value our connections to our family members, and we need to do the same thing for our kindred animals. And I think that's going to be a real challenge. I'm sure you've seen the news stories that say the food chain is broken, right? Where are we going to get our meat from? And because of the disruption of food supply chains, millions and millions of animals that could not be processed have had to be killed, gassed or suffocated. And most people aren't giving that a thought. So I think it's a serious challenge. It's one of perception. And I think advocates like you and me and so many in our vegan community are the ones that are bringing this to the front of awareness and saying, hey, this is a wake-up call. We need to change the ways in which we live.
Right. And when we get, and I'm sure that you get this too, why do you have to show those pictures? Why do you have to tell us about this? Because how else will you wake up? How else will you be able to see what's happening? And if you were that victim, wouldn't you want somebody to show that?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really great way of putting it. And I also mentioned to people to think about, well, why do we react with such horror? Why don't we want to see those things? It's not because we're cruel. We're innately compassionate people. So we don't want to see another being suffer. So it affects us, but we need to see that in a positive sort of way, that we're simply reacting with our own natural ability to love, and then we can use that as a point to take action.
Well, thank you so much for being with me today, Joan. But before you go, can you just tell me briefly about, you have a new book coming up shortly?
Right. Yeah. The new book is called Vegan Voices, Essays by Inspiring Change Makers, and it's due to come out in roughly 1 year. And it's going to be a compilation of about 45 to 50 different writers from all areas of vegan advocacy, including you.
Thank
And
you.
this will be a wonderful, wonderful book for any reader who's interested in finding out, what is veganism about? Why is it something that I need to consider? So I'm very excited about that book and look forward to. I would say that the best part of being the editor and compiler of this book is that I'm going to get to really know each and every one of you really well and know the important messages that you're all sharing.
I'm excited for that book. I'm excited for you, and I am honored to be part of it.
Well, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Joan, and
Thank
take
you.
care.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Remember to like us on Facebook, check out our blog, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Live vegan.